Representatives from 12 alien civilizations would gather on the Ford's deck, officially welcoming Earth into the galactic community. The carrier that had once defended Earth from alien invasion would now host the ceremony that secured humanity's future among the stars. Below deck, engineering teams monitored the integration of Earth and alien technology. The Ford had become a testing ground for combining different civilizations' innovations. Its success had inspired similar projects around the world, as humanity eagerly learned from their new allies while sharing their own unique perspectives. "Remember how scared we were that first day?" Sun Mai asked, turning to face Minho. "When we thought we were about to lose everything." "Now look at us," he replied, gesturing to the alien ships above. "Teaching advanced civilizations about thinking outside the box. Makes you wonder what we'll achieve in another year." The harbor grew crowded as more vessels arrived for the ceremony. Earth ships and alien craft shared the waters and skies, a sight that would have seemed impossible just a year ago. News helicopters circled carefully, broadcasting the historic event to billions of viewers around the world. As the Ford approached its designated position, Minho thought about how his ship's role had changed. Once built for war, it now served as a bridge between worlds. The carrier's story had become required reading in military academies across the galaxy, a lesson in how innovation could overcome superior technology. The ship's new diplomatic spaces filled with representatives from Earth and alien worlds. Languages from across the galaxy mixed with the sounds of the harbor, all working together to forge a new future. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not through conquest or superior technology, but through creativity and determination. Sun Mei's tablet beeped softly. Another alien vessel requesting landing clearance. She granted it automatically, the new hybrid systems handling the complex calculations needed for safe alien landings. "You know," she said, "I think we got something better than just saving Earth. We showed the galaxy a whole new way of thinking." Minho nodded as the carrier came to its final position. The deck crew, now a mix of human and alien technicians, worked together smoothly to guide incoming shuttles. The Ford had become more than just a symbol of human ingenuity. It was proof that different civilizations could learn from each other, grow together, and build something greater than the sum of their parts. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the U.S. Gerald R. Ford waited to witness another historic moment. The ship that had changed the course of human history with a single innovative act would now help guide humanity's first steps into a larger universe, full of endless possibilities and surprises yet to come. In the back of his mind, he remembered an old saying his grandfather, a veteran of the Korean War, used to tell him. Sometimes the biggest ships can be sunk by the smallest holes. There had to be a weakness. They just needed to find it. As he watched the alien ships casting their shadows over his beloved Seoul, he refused to accept that humanity would simply surrender without finding a way to fight back. The question was, how do you fight an enemy so advanced that your best weapons can't even touch them? As military leaders around the world asked themselves this question, the clock kept ticking toward their deadline, and humanity's future hung in the balance. The Pentagon's massive war room buzzed with activity as military leaders from around the world worked desperately to find a solution. Screens covered the walls, showing live feeds of the alien ships hovering over major cities. The atmosphere was tense, with the weight of humanity's future pressing down on everyone present. Lieutenant Kim Mayray ran through the corridors of the Pentagon, her heart pounding. She had been working non-stop with her research team for the past 18 hours, analyzing every bit of data they could gather about the alien shields. Her tablet contained what might be humanity's only hope, even if it seemed completely crazy. She burst through the war room's heavy doors, ignoring the startled looks from the high-ranking officers. Her hair was messy, and her uniform was wrinkled from hours of continuous work, but none of that mattered now. She headed straight for Admiral Park Du-young, who was studying a holographic display of the alien ship positions. "The Ford," she said, trying to catch her breath. "We can use the Ford." Admiral Park turned away from the display, raising an eyebrow at the young lieutenant. The Supercarrier, against their shields. His voice carried a mix of doubt and curiosity. Mireille nodded eagerly, pulling up diagrams on her tablet. Not as a weapon, as something else entirely. She displayed a complex series of calculations and wave patterns. Their shields operate on principles we've never seen before, but they have a weakness. We can exploit it using the carrier's electromagnetic launch systems and nuclear reactor. The room fell silent as senior military officers gathered around her display. Mireille's fingers flew across the screen as she explained her theory. Look at these energy readings from their shields. They pulse at regular intervals, creating a pattern. It's similar to how our electromagnetic aircraft launch system works on the Ford, but much more advanced. She pulled up another diagram, this one showing the U.S. Gerald R. Ford's EMALS, electromagnetic aircraft launch system. Specifications. If we modify the carrier's launch systems and connect them directly to the nuclear reactor, we could create a massive electromagnetic pulse at exactly the right frequency. It would be like playing a musical note that shatters a glass, except in this case, we'd be disrupting their shield harmonics. Admiral Park studied the calculations carefully. The Ford wasn't built for anything like this. You're talking about pushing its systems far beyond their design limits. Exactly, Mireille said, her eyes bright with determination. The aliens would never expect it because it's completely insane by normal engineering standards. They're looking for conventional weapons, missiles, bombs, fighters, not a repurposed aircraft carrier. One of the nuclear engineers in the room spoke up. The stress on the reactor would be enormous. We'd basically be turning the entire carrier into one giant electromagnetic pulse generator. If our calculations are off even slightly, the ship would be destroyed. Mireille finished for him. I know, but right now we're looking at losing everything anyway. Admiral Park paced the room, considering the proposal. The Ford was one of America's most advanced and expensive military vessels. Using it for this crazy plan would either save humanity or destroy a $13 billion warship in a spectacular failure. How sure are you about these calculations? He asked Mireille. We've triple-checked everything, she replied. The theory is sound. The alien shields operate on predictable frequencies. They have to, or they'd be unstable. We just need something powerful enough to hit those frequencies with enough force to disrupt them. The Admiral looked around the room at his fellow officers. They had less than 30 hours left before the aliens' deadline, and no other plans had shown any promise. Sometimes, he thought, the craziest plans were the only ones that worked. How long would it take to modify the Ford systems? He asked. Mireille consulted her notes. With every available engineer and technician working around the clock, maybe 20 hours. We'd need to reconfigure the EMALS, modify the reactor protocols, and install some special equipment we've been developing. Admiral Park straightened his uniform and made his decision. Lieutenant Kim, gather your team. I'll have the Ford moved into position immediately. As of now, this is our primary strategy. The room burst into activity as orders were issued and personnel mobilized. Mireille clutched her tablet, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Her plan might be humanity's last hope, but it was also possibly the craziest thing any military had ever attempted. As she rushed out to begin the modifications, she heard Admiral Park giving orders to clear all non-essential personnel from the Ford. If her calculations were wrong, at least they'd minimize the loss of life. If she was right, they might just save the world with the most expensive electromagnetic pulse generator ever built. The clock was ticking, and the fate of humanity now rested on a plan so crazy it just might work. The U.S. Gerald R. Ford cut through the Pacific waters at maximum speed, leaving a white wake behind its massive hull. The Supercarrier's flight deck, usually home to fighter jets and helicopters, had been transformed into a maze of cables, equipment, and hurrying engineers. The usual sounds of aircraft operations were replaced by the buzz of power tools and shouts of technical instructions. Dr. Lee Sunmai hadn't slept in over 30 hours, but adrenaline kept her going. Her hands moved quickly over the modified control panel as she directed teams of Navy engineers in their race against time. The carrier's electromagnetic aircraft launch system, or EMALS, was being pushed far beyond its original design specifications. "Pass me that calibration tool," she called out to a nearby technician. The summer heat combined with the disabled air conditioning made the work even more challenging. They had shut down all non-essential systems to redirect power to their modifications. Chief Engineer Choi Ta-won crawled out from under a panel, his face streaked with grease and concern. "These power readings are off the charts," he said, showing Sunmai his diagnostic tablet. "The EMALS wasn't designed for this kind of power load. We're pushing way beyond safety limits." Sunmai wiped sweat from her brow, leaving a smudge of dirt across her forehead. "We don't have a choice," she replied, checking another set of readings. "The aliens are getting suspicious about why we're taking so long to respond. Have you seen their ships? They're moving into lower orbits. They know we're up to something." Above them, 3 massive collective ships had broken from their original positions and now hung lower in the atmosphere, their dark shapes casting moving shadows across the ocean. Every few hours, they'd broadcast the same message: "Your delay suggests resistance. This would be unwise." The carrier's captain had ordered all unnecessary crew members below decks to shield them from the aliens' view. Only the engineers and technical teams remained topside, disguised as maintenance workers performing routine repairs. They had to make their massive modification project look like normal carrier operations. "The reactor team reports they're ready for the power coupling," a young engineer called out, running up to Sunmai with a clipboard. "But they're worried about the containment systems. We've never run the reactor at these levels before." Sunmai nodded, making quick calculations in her head. They were essentially turning the Ford's nuclear reactor into a giant battery for the world's largest electromagnetic pulse generator. One mistake could melt down the reactor or tear the ship apart. "Tell them to proceed with the coupling," she ordered, "but have them install the emergency shutdown systems we designed. If the power levels spike too high, we need to be able to cut everything instantly." Taiwan moved to another section of the modified launch system, checking connections. "The original EMALS was designed to launch aircraft," he muttered. "Now we're trying to use it to create an electromagnetic pulse powerful enough to disrupt alien shield technology. If my engineering professors could see this." Sunmai managed a tired smile. Sometimes the best solutions are the ones that seem impossible at first. She checked her watch. 15 hours until the aliens' deadline. "How are we doing on the frequency modulators?" "Almost finished," Tadwan replied. "But these power loads, even if everything works perfectly, we might only get one shot at this. The systems could burn out completely after the first pulse." Around them, dozens of engineers and technicians continued their work, racing against time. The flight deck had become a tangle of heavy power cables, connecting the modified EMALS to the nuclear reactor below. Specialized equipment, rushed in from research labs across the country, had been installed wherever there was space. The ship's radar operator called down from the bridge. "Dr. Lee, the alien ships are changing position again. They're moving to surround us." Sunmai rushed to the edge of the flight deck, looking up at the massive vessels. Their dark hulls seemed to absorb the sunlight, and their shield patterns rippled visibly now that they were closer to Earth's atmosphere. They were running out of time. "Everyone, double-check your work," she shouted across the deck. "We need these modifications perfect. Humanity gets one chance at this, and we're it." The weight of their responsibility pressed down on every person on deck. They were attempting something that had never been done before, using technology in ways it was never intended to be used. If they succeeded, they might save Earth. If they failed, the Ford would likely be destroyed, and humanity would lose its last hope of resistance. As the sun began to set over the Pacific, casting orange light across the busy flight deck, Sun Mai allowed herself a moment to appreciate the incredible scene around her. Hundreds of people working together, pushing the boundaries of human engineering and creativity, all in a desperate bid to save their world. Whatever happened tomorrow, they had already accomplished something remarkable. The aliens continued their orbital dance above, unaware that below them, humanity was preparing one of the craziest technological gambles in history. The dawn light crept across the Atlantic Ocean, painting the water in shades of gold and orange. The U.S. Gerald R. Ford floated alone in the vast expanse of water, its massive bulk deliberately exposed and vulnerable. Gone were the escort ships that usually protected America's most powerful warship. Now it sat isolated, like a wounded animal waiting to be picked off by predators. Captain Song Min-ho stood steady on the carrier's bridge, his experienced eyes fixed on the alien vessels through his binoculars. Years of naval training had taught him patience, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. His hands remained steady as he tracked the massive ships moving through the morning sky, their dark shapes blocking out the stars that were still visible in the fading night. "Status report," he ordered, his voice calm despite the tension filling the bridge. "Engineering reports all modifications are holding steady," his executive officer replied. "Dr. Lee and her team are standing by in the control center. The reactor is running at minimum power to mask our preparations." Min-ho lowered his binoculars and studied the tactical display. The carrier's advanced sensors showed 3 alien vessels breaking away from their orbital positions, descending toward the ocean. Their movement was deliberate, predatory. "They're moving into position," his tactical officer announced, pointing to the screen. 3 vessels approaching from the north, just as we anticipated. "They're maintaining a triangle formation." "Of course they are," Min-ho said quietly. "They think we're helpless. Just a primitive warship with nowhere to run." He allowed himself a small smile. Sometimes being underestimated was the greatest advantage. The bridge crew worked silently at their stations, each person aware that humanity's fate might depend on their performance in the next few hours. They had drilled these procedures countless times over the past day, but now it was real. Min-ho keyed his radio, his voice carrying throughout the massive ship. "All hands, prepare for Phase 2. Remember your training. Engineering teams, stand by for power-up sequence. Damage control teams to your stations." The alien ships drew closer, their massive hulls now clearly visible without binoculars. Their shield patterns pulsed with strange energy, creating ripples in the air around them. Suddenly, beams of light shot down from the vessels, scanning the carrier's deck. "They're running preliminary scans," the sensor officer reported. "Their capture beams are powering up. Energy readings are increasing." Min-ho watched as the alien ships positioned themselves around the carrier. It was exactly what they had hoped for. The aliens were falling for their trap. The Ford, appearing to be dead in the water, had proven too tempting a target. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the lead alien vessel." "Put it on speakers," Min-ho ordered. A cold, artificial voice filled the bridge. "Earth vessel, you have been selected for acquisition. Your technological capabilities will be assessed and archived. Resistance is unnecessary. Prepare for boarding." Min-ho pressed his own transmit button. "This is Captain Song Min-ho of the U.S. Gerald R. Ford. We are experiencing engine difficulties and request assistance." The lie came easily. It was part of the plan to make their bait more convincing. The alien response was immediate. "Assistance is not required. Your vessel will be acquired regardless of its operational status." More scanning beams swept across the carrier's deck, probing its systems. The aliens were thorough, but they weren't finding what really mattered. All the modifications were hidden beneath the deck, shielded from their scans by specially designed materials. "Energy spike from the alien vessels," the tactical officer reported urgently. "They're activating their capture systems." Min-ho watched as strange, shimmering fields of energy began to extend from the alien ships, reaching down toward the carrier like giant hands about to pluck a toy from a bathtub. The moment they had waited for was approaching. "All stations, final positions," he ordered. "Engineering, begin power-up sequence. Reactor control, prepare for emergency protocols." He turned to his crew, meeting each person's eyes. "Remember, we get one shot at this. Everything we've worked for comes down to the next few minutes." The alien capture beams grew stronger, their light illuminating the carrier's deck with an otherworldly glow. Above them, the three massive ships moved into their final attack positions, their shadows turning the morning sun into twilight. They had taken the bait. Now it was time to spring the trap that would either save humanity or doom them all. Captain Song Min-ho gripped the bridge railing, watching the alien ships draw closer, and waited for the perfect moment to give the order that would change history. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, and it all depended on whether their crazy plan would work. Everything they had done, the modifications, the preparations, the deliberate appearance of vulnerability, had led to this moment. The next few minutes would determine whether humanity would survive or submit to alien domination. And still the alien ships came closer, unaware that they were about to face something they had never encountered in all their travels across the galaxy. Human ingenuity at its most desperate and creative. The alien capture beams were just meters away from touching the carrier's deck when Captain Song Min-ho took a deep breath and spoke the word that would decide Earth's fate. Now. Deep within the carrier's modified control center, Dr. Lee Sun-me's hands moved with practiced precision. She grabbed the massive red lever they had installed just 24 hours ago and threw it forward. The deck beneath her feet began to vibrate as the nuclear reactor spun up to maximum power, far beyond its designed limits. Warning alarms blared throughout the ship as the modified electromagnetic launch systems pulled more power than they were ever meant to handle. The carrier's lights flickered and dimmed as every bit of electrical energy was diverted to their makeshift weapon. "Power levels at maximum," an engineer shouted over the growing roar of the systems. "Electromagnetic field charging. Frequency locked." Sun-mai watched the gauges climb into the red zone. The entire ship groaned under the strain as if it might tear itself apart. But they had planned for this moment, calculated every detail, and now they would see if their crazy plan would work. "Initiating pulse," she shouted, and pressed the final sequence of buttons. The world seemed to pause for a fraction of a second. Then a massive wave of invisible energy burst outward from the carrier in all directions. The air itself appeared to ripple as the electromagnetic pulse, precisely tuned to the alien shield's frequency, expanded outward like a tsunami of pure energy. On the bridge, Captain Min-ho and his crew watched in awe as the pulse hit the alien ships. Their beautiful, rippling shield patterns suddenly flickered like dying light bulbs. The capture beams wavered and distorted. "Direct hit," the tactical officer called out. "Their shield frequencies are destabilizing." The alien vessels, each larger than a dozen aircraft carriers, began to shake violently. Their shields flashed with chaotic patterns as the electromagnetic pulse disrupted their carefully maintained frequencies. Then, with a visible wave of energy that looked like shattering glass, their shields failed completely. Below deck, Sun-mai gripped her control panel as the ship's systems strained under the enormous power load. "Secondary pulse charging," she reported through the radio. "Reactor holding steady. Barely." The alien ships tried to retreat, their engines flaring to life. But the electromagnetic pulse had done more than just destroy their shields. It had crashed their main computer systems, leaving them temporarily paralyzed in the sky. "It worked," Sun-mai whispered in disbelief, watching the sensor readings. It actually worked. Her voice grew stronger as the reality sank in. "Captain, their shields are completely down. All their major systems are offline." On the bridge, Min-ho allowed himself a small smile. The aliens had never expected a primitive Earth vessel to produce an electromagnetic pulse powerful enough to disrupt their advanced technology. They had been so confident in their superiority that they never considered the possibility of humans turning their own supercarrier into a giant electronic weapon. Secondary pulse ready, Sun Mai reported from below. Should I fire? Min Ho keyed his radio, but not to respond to Sun Mai. Instead, he broadcast on all frequencies, knowing the alien ships would hear. Attention collective vessels. This is Captain Song Min Ho of the U.S. Gerald R. Ford. As you can see, we are not as primitive as you assumed. Return to orbit immediately, or we will fire again. Your shields cannot protect you anymore. The alien ships hung motionless in the air, their once mighty presence now diminished without their protective shields. After what seemed like an eternity, their engines ignited, and they slowly began to ascend. They're retreating, the tactical officer confirmed. All 3 vessels are returning to high orbit. A cheer erupted throughout the carrier as crew members realized what they had accomplished. Humanity had just fought back against an overwhelmingly superior force, and won. In the control center, Sun Mai finally allowed herself to relax slightly, though she kept her hands near the controls. The modified systems were still holding together, ready to fire again if needed. She looked at the technical readouts, amazed that their desperate plan had actually worked. The carrier's nuclear reactor slowly powered down from its dangerous peak, and the warning alarms finally fell silent. They had pushed the mighty ship far beyond its design limits, but it had held together just long enough to give Earth a fighting chance. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting its light across the vast ocean, the U.S. Gerald R. Ford floated proudly on the waters of the Atlantic. Above, the alien ships retreated to a safe distance, their operators no doubt reconsidering their opinion of Earth's primitive technology. Humanity had just changed the rules of the game, and nothing would ever be the same. 3 days after the U.S. Gerald R. Ford's historic defense of Earth, the massive carrier hosted an unprecedented meeting. The ship's flight deck, still bearing marks from its recent modification, served as the setting for humanity's first diplomatic contact with the Stellar Collective. The Collective's regional commander, a tall figure in flowing robes that seemed to shift colors in the sunlight, stood examining the modified electromagnetic launch systems. Their translator, a small floating device, converted their complex language into English with only a slight delay. You turned a maritime vessel into a shield-breaking device, using only your existing technology. The commander's tone carried unmistakable astonishment, even through the translation. They ran a sensor over the modified equipment, shaking their head in disbelief. Admiral Park Du-young stood proudly on the flight deck, flanked by Captain Song Min Ho and Dr. Lee Sun Mai. "Humans are good at finding creative solutions," he replied with a slight smile. "Perhaps you should have studied us more carefully before demanding our surrender." The alien commander moved closer to inspect the modified nuclear reactor controls. "In all our expansion across 12 galaxies, we have never encountered a species that would think to use a water vessel's launch system as a weapon against our shields. The concept would never have occurred to us." Dr. Lee Sun Mai stepped forward, unable to contain her scientific curiosity. "Your shield technology is actually quite similar to our electromagnetic launch systems in basic principles. We just had to scale up the power and match the frequencies." The commander turned their attention to Sun Mai. "You discovered this compatibility in less than 2 days, while under threat of planetary conquest." "We work well under pressure," she replied with a shrug. "Necessity is the mother of invention, as we say on Earth." Word of Earth's innovative defense spread quickly through the galaxy. The Collective's communication networks buzzed with discussions of how a supposedly primitive species had managed to overcome their advanced shields using repurposed technology. Military analysts from various alien species studied the records of the encounter. Many refused to believe it at first. The idea that a Class 3 civilization could defeat Class 7 technology seemed impossible, but the evidence was undeniable. Back on the carrier's deck, the commander's scientific advisor was examining the modifications in detail. "The power requirements for this should have torn your vessel apart," they noted through the translator. Captain Song Min Ho nodded. "We knew the risks. The entire ship could have been destroyed if our calculations were off by even a small margin. But facing planetary conquest, we decided it was worth the attempt. The commander's next words surprised everyone present. The collective would like to propose a technological exchange program. Your species clearly has a unique way of approaching problems that could benefit both our civilizations. Admiral Park raised an eyebrow. Just days ago, you were demanding our surrender. Now you want to exchange technology. The collective expands through superior force because we believed we were superior in all ways, the commander replied. You have proven that technological advancement and innovation are not always the same thing. We have much to learn from each other. News outlets across Earth broadcast images of the historic meeting. Humanity had not only defended itself, but had earned the respect of an advanced alien civilization. Scientists and engineers from around the world were already studying the alien technology, looking for new ways to adapt and improve their own systems. The U.S. Gerald R. Ford, once just a powerful warship, had become a symbol of human ingenuity throughout the galaxy. Alien vessels passing Earth would alter their course to get a glimpse of the famous carrier that had changed their understanding of technological advancement. As the sun set on the historic meeting, Admiral Park watched the alien delegation depart in their still shieldless vessel. You know, he said to Dr. Lee and Captain Song, sometimes the best way to advance isn't to create new technology, but to look at what you already have in a completely new way. The carrier's deck grew quiet as darkness fell, but its place in history was now secured. Humanity had proven that innovation wasn't just about having the most advanced technology. It was about having the creativity and courage to use what you had in unprecedented ways. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, other civilizations were beginning to look at their own technology differently, wondering what new possibilities they had never considered before. Earth's reputation for technological ingenuity would only grow stronger in the years to come. The Statue of Liberty stood tall against the morning sky as the U.S. Gerald R. Ford sailed majestically into New York Harbor. The massive carrier looked different now, its deck modified with both Earth and alien technology. A year of serving as humanity's primary diplomatic vessel had transformed the warship into something entirely new. Captain Song Minho stood at the rail, watching the city skyline grow larger. Beside him, Dr. Lee Sunmei checked readings on her tablet, monitoring the new hybrid systems they had installed during the carrier's recent refit. The ship now carried technologies from 3 different alien civilizations, all integrated with its original systems. Above them, diplomatic vessels from Earth's new alien allies descended through the atmosphere. Their hulls shimmered with shield technology, though none as powerful as the ones the Ford had defeated a year ago. That event had changed everything, earning humanity a place among the stars far earlier than anyone had expected. Energy readings are all normal, Sun Mai reported, though she knew Minho wasn't really concerned about the technical details at this moment. They were both lost in thought, remembering how much had changed in just 1 year. The Ford's flight deck had been redesigned to accommodate both Earth aircraft and alien shuttles. Where fighter jets once stood ready for war, diplomatic meeting spaces now shared room with advanced defense systems. The carrier had become a symbol of humanity's rapid advancement and unique approach to technology. Did you ever think a supercarrier would end up saving Earth by not firing a single shot? Sun Mai asked, watching an alien shuttle make its final approach to the deck. Minho smiled, his eyes following the shuttle's graceful landing. That's humanity for you. We're full of surprises. He paused, remembering the tension of that historic day. Sometimes the best weapon is the one you never have to fire. The carrier's shadow fell across the water as it moved slowly through the harbor. Tourist boats followed at a safe distance, their passengers taking photos of both the famous ship and the alien vessels above. New York had seen many historic moments, but today would be special. The signing of the Galactic Cooperation Treaty. Representatives from 12 alien civilizations would gather on the Ford's deck, officially welcoming Earth into the galactic community. The carrier that had once defended Earth from alien invasion would now host the ceremony that secured humanity's future among the stars. Below deck, engineering teams monitored the integration of Earth and alien technology. The Ford had become a testing ground for combining different civilizations' innovations. Its success had inspired similar projects around the world, as humanity eagerly learned from their new allies while sharing their own unique perspectives. "Remember how scared we were that first day?" Sun Mai asked, turning to face Minho. "When we thought we were about to lose everything." "Now look at us," he replied, gesturing to the alien ships above. "Teaching advanced civilizations about thinking outside the box. Makes you wonder what we'll achieve in another year." The harbor grew crowded as more vessels arrived for the ceremony. Earth ships and alien craft shared the waters and skies, a sight that would have seemed impossible just a year ago. News helicopters circled carefully, broadcasting the historic event to billions of viewers around the world. As the Ford approached its designated position, Minho thought about how his ship's role had changed. Once built for war, it now served as a bridge between worlds. The carrier's story had become required reading in military academies across the galaxy, a lesson in how innovation could overcome superior technology. The ship's new diplomatic spaces filled with representatives from Earth and alien worlds. Languages from across the galaxy mixed with the sounds of the harbor, all working together to forge a new future. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not through conquest or superior technology, but through creativity and determination. Sun Mei's tablet beeped softly. Another alien vessel requesting landing clearance. She granted it automatically, the new hybrid systems handling the complex calculations needed for safe alien landings. "You know," she said, "I think we got something better than just saving Earth. We showed the galaxy a whole new way of thinking." Minho nodded as the carrier came to its final position. The deck crew, now a mix of human and alien technicians, worked together smoothly to guide incoming shuttles. The Ford had become more than just a symbol of human ingenuity. It was proof that different civilizations could learn from each other, grow together, and build something greater than the sum of their parts. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the U.S. Gerald R. Ford waited to witness another historic moment. The ship that had changed the course of human history with a single innovative act would now help guide humanity's first steps into a larger universe, full of endless possibilities and surprises yet to come.